think we'll start from here. So let me briefly welcome everybody, and I'll look at the camera now. And this is obviously we're very fortunate to have Dr. Miller willing to come and join us and talk about this culmination of the first round of helmet study test results. This is not the end, but I'll let him touch on that. This is a big deal because so many of our national orgs put this together in an effort to help all of us. And, the helmet lab at Virginia Tech has a sterling reputation, has helped transform sports to be safer and safer and safer. And for my own 2 cents, I hope that this is the starting point, and that when we're talking 5 years from now, we're just going, oh, wow, remember when we were all freaking out? Now look at the helmets, and now look at the reduction of impact. So with very little ado, I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Miller, and we'll start this chat. And we will have questions. We're going to go over some elements of the testing first, but we will come to your questions. So Barry, I'm going to let you take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you very much on behalf of Drs. Duma, Dr. Rosen, and all the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab staff. We appreciate you, Emily, for hosting this, and we also appreciate all these people for attending. Hopefully, from this meeting and discussion, you guys will have a better understanding of what it is and what it isn't that we did, and you can share that with whomever you desire. I think this will be important. But first, so also want to thank Jacqueline Mars, the USHJA, USEF, USEA for funding this research. It's because of organizations and people like that, it helps us remain independent. We are not funded by any helmet company, any helmet technology, or any associated business. So we have no conflicts of interest and truly operate independently. And our research is there to help inform and advance safety. It's part of our public service mission as the Virginia Tech University. And so that's the first and most important thing. So and some of you might not be totally familiar with, I have a couple notes. I want to make sure I get to a couple of these things. And as I go through these items, I've read some of the questions that came out. I've already had many discussions last week. So I'll go through some of the components of like test rig, et cetera, and I'll answer some of the questions I think are already out there, and I'll address those. And then we'll go to the actual STAR equation and how it actually works and what it means. How do you interpret it? So I think Emily will kind of monitor the chat, and so I can probably address some questions but more than likely I'll get to those as I discuss each aspect of the various items related to the methodology, et cetera. So for those aren't familiar, the STAR ratings are part of our public service mission. This is our 9th STAR rating release. We started about 10 years ago with the first ever in football. And, our STAR ratings do have real world implications. For example, football and soccer headgear, Virginia Tech highly rated, like 5-star rated helmets in those categories actually have documented and published research papers that say those helmets that are higher rated than the lower ones do in fact reduce concussion risk on the field. So lots of football data, of course. So our work is translational, it is meaningful, and we're hoping that it will happen to the equestrian world as well. So let's see here. So let's start with the evolution of safety. So if you think about auto safety, the 40 years ago, they first started making us wear seat belts, right? We had a lap belt, and then they added the shoulder strap, and then they started putting crumple zones in cars, and then we got our first airbag, and then we had multiple airbags. Now we have airbags everywhere. Now we have cameras. We have sensors that tell you if someone's in your blind spot, sensors that tell you what lane you're in case you start deviating. Well, that's all great. So that's, the latest technology is always great to incorporate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your current car isn't safe. It's just there's other things to consider. Well, now when we think about the equestrian world, so I don't know how many years ago, but we first started telling people you need to wear a helmet. Any helmet's probably better than no helmet. So that's step number 1, and that was good. And now that people are wearing helmets, at least a good portion of you, now can we get you in a certified helmet? And these certifications are important. There's certain certifications that have different components to them. There's a rigidity or crush test. There's a penetration test. impact attenuation test, there's hazard anvils, a hemisphere anvil. And so all these things are really important because what it tells you is that if you wear that helmet for that given activity, that you're not going to have a catastrophic head injury. So skull fracture and death. So if we can get you to wear any helmet that's certified, that is a big step forward. So your helmets are safe, people. But the next phase is, can we further advance these helmets to not only protect you against catastrophic head injury, but now can we better protect you against concussion risk, right? So that's the big next phase. And it's huge, right? So probably the biggest component to this new research in this equestrian star ratings, we're now including both linear and rotational head kinematics in the assessment of helmet performance. The standards use linear acceleration. They talk about adding rotation, but I don't think any of them use it at this point in time. And so we know from lots and lots of research that both linear and rotational head accelerations increase concussion risk or play a role in concussion risk. And so we want to measure that. So for those that aren't familiar, Dr. Daignault has a recorded PowerPoint presentation. It's about 18 minutes long, and it was stage 2. So it kind of tells you and recaps all the research we did to actually get to this point. I'm going to more talk about, where we are now, but that's a great 18-minute read PowerPoint. He tries to keep it in layman's term for the most part, even though it gets a little technical. But so I want to start with a couple things related to the methodology, and hopefully these will start to answer quite a few of your questions. So I'm going to start with the test rig. I know there's been some questions on, why we use the pendulum. So we did a bunch of developmental tests out in our equestrian facility on dirt, on sand, on grass. And when we drop these head forms, with our portable pendulum, it's got a head form, it's got a neck. We put helmets, and sometimes we do bare head forms as well. And so we start to get these traces or these impacts. And we know what are the time traces of these forces or these accelerations. And so we start looking at all these and we say, all right, now when we come back to the lab, how do we best match those real world on-field head kinematics with whatever test rig, or maybe we need to build one with what we have. And so the first and foremost reason why the pendulum is chosen is because the pendulum best matched those time traces from those equestrian dirt, sand, grass head impacts. So that's the most, and it's also a very reliable test rig. We take the pendulum arm up to a certain angle, we get a nice repeatable velocity at impact. The helmet, head form, sliding mass is all stationary before it gets hit, so it's easy to make sure everything's in place. And another reason why we chose the pendulum, so we analyzed over 100 videos. We combed through all the research, and from what we found, we didn't find a lot of forward velocity with our impacts. So in other words, if you're moving along forward, you drop vertically, you probably hit your head at some sort of angle. Well, most of the research in the videos we analyzed, there was not a lot of forward velocity. And that's where people start discussing like these oblique impacts. We do oblique impacts in our sport or snow sport helmet ratings and our bike helmet ratings, where we have quantified how much forward velocity there really is. We could not quantify with this research at this point in time if there was any or how much forward velocity there was. So henceforth, we still continued to use the pendulum because it was the best match at that point, and we did not need to impart a big oblique impact. We're happy to modify and add an oblique impact if that information, that data gets published and we can quantify what we would need to do. So we're an evolving methodology. We're not stuck to this, but at this point in time, we needed to move forward and we did not have that information. And so that's why the pendulum is being used. Again, it's my favorite impactor here. We have lots of them, but I think it's the easiest, fastest, and again, extremely reliable and dependable and repeatable. So that's that. So that's why the test rig, it was chosen. Let's talk about head forms. I know that question's come up, and I have a couple here. So you guys have probably seen this on the videos. We chose to use the Noxie head form. This head form was actually designed for sport helmets. So, and equestrian is a sport. There's other head forms out there, and I'll grab this one that are commonly used. This is the Hybrid 3 head form. This came out of the auto safety. And It's used heavily, 50th percentile, just like we use the 50th percentile male hymen. It represents most of the people in the population. The hybrid 3 is very, very tacky. It's got a high degree of friction. The Noxie head form is a little smoother, doesn't have as much friction, and that's going to kind of make a difference when I discuss a couple of things moving forward. But we use the Noxie head form quite extensively. So that's why we chose that head form. Helmet size, I know that's been a question out there. So we buy the helmet size that's appropriate for this blue Noxie head form, which is about 57.7 centimeters in circumference. It is long and oval shaped, pretty similar to my head. And we always laugh because if we're trying on helmets, I can tell you that the 50th percentile male human head fits me well, and it fits this head form well. So I've tried on a bunch of helmets. So long and oval for the most part. When we fit them, obviously a helmet should be comfortable, right? It should be maybe slightly snug to slightly loose. There is no research for those out there that are questioning, helmet fit and performance. There's no research out there that correlates helmet fit and impact protection. So we fit helmets just like you guys out in the real world fit helmets. You need one that kind of feels like it fits your head. It's not too tight. It's not too loose. Slightly snug, I said, or slightly loose is kind of the range we shoot for. And I think one of the big things is that, the most important part of, I'll save that for helmet fit and some of the other things. Let me move on. So, okay. So we also use a hybrid 3 neck in our testing. There's some other testing protocols that do not use necks, and we don't always use a neck either. The bike and snow sport helmets have the drop tower. It's that free falling head form without a neck attached because we want to impart a lot of rotation. We want to measure that, and with a neck attached or a full torso, it's really hard to do. If you guys comb through the literature, you'll see a bunch of different test rigs and configurations of how people do things. There's good and bad reasons for them. And I'm not saying all of them are right or wrong. It's just different to some extent. But we like to include the neck when we can because we think that is more biofidelic to the human body. You have a head, you have a neck, you have a torso, and we try to replicate that with our test methodology as best we can. The impact locations we chose, front, side, and back, and those were determined by a bunch of literature research out there. The certification standards are video analysis. For the front impact, we actually lean a little bit forward, so it's not a centric hit with 30 degrees. The side impact, we have a slight tilt. I guess I got to go this way if I'm telling you. About 10 degrees of tilt, slightly off center. And then the back is close to centric in the middle of your head. And so not all of our hits are centric, and that's kind of important because when they're non-centric, it's going to impart some rotation, and we want to measure that. Obviously, you guys could hit your heads in an infinite number of ways, locations on a helmet, but these 3 locations with those typical angles are pretty representative of a robust test protocol for these helmets. Again, you could hit your head anywhere, but these are probably very representative of the locations in general. So the energy levels, so the velocities of impact were determined by our video analysis of people falling off horses. The certifications, the standards, what levels of energy do they use? Our on-field tests out on our equestrians, we did dirt, we did sand, we did grass. We did a bunch of tests here in the lab comparing bike tower to pendulum to, we did all kinds of things. So those energy levels were determined by all those factors. And obviously the research papers out there, I think I mentioned that. So we started with 40 helmets for our initial phase, and we are going to continue to add helmets, everybody. This is not the end and be all. We just had to stop somewhere. I was initially shooting for 25 to 30 based on the 300 probably models available out there. But we ended up with 40. One of your well-known retailers actually served as a consultant to help us, pick what are the more popular models, brands, etc. We used that in conjunction with the master list, and we tried to get as many as we could. So that includes a wide variety of manufacturers, models, price points, and with and without certain rotational technologies. And really, MIPS is the only technology that's incorporated with the equestrian helmets at this point in time. So we use 4 samples of each helmet model for our testing protocol. They need to be the same size. They need to have the same finish because we want to make sure that they're pretty much the same helmet. Each helmet's only impacted at once per location. So the helmets are not repeated impacts at any given location because these are single impact helmets. Obviously, you could have deformation, cracks, crumble, crack, whatever, break, compressed. So we do not do that. Football helmets are a little different. Those are multi-impact type helmets. But we don't do that with our single impact sports that we cover. So, so we do 3 locations and 2 energy levels, and we do 2 trials per condition. So 12 tests total will make up each helmet model. And so, but again, each helmet model is only tested one time in one location. So we can do this side, we can do the back, all in one helmet, maybe all low energy. The next one's all high energy. Then we switch, we do 2 trials. So that's why we need 4 helmets. So, all right, so let's talk about MIPS. I know there's a lot of question about MIPS. So let's first talk about, what is MIPS? MIPS is one of several rotational mitigating technologies. So equestrian helmets, to my knowledge, the only one that is included in those is MIPS. But so how does it work? So these rotational mitigating technologies are designed to help decouple your helmet from your head. So I'm going to put on, this is a bike helmet, it happens to have MIPS in it. And so anytime I'm wearing a helmet, this is a nice blue and look good. So I don't want this helmet to take my head with it per se, right? So if I get hit with this helmet, I want the helmet to move independently of my head a little bit, just milliseconds or fractions of seconds before it ends up taking my head with it. So we want the helmet to decouple from your head a little bit, right? That is important. What that does, it increases impact duration, right? Also probably takes out some of those rotational head movements and maybe some of the linear head movements as it, attenuates some energy. And so if we could decrease those things, we decrease risk because we decrease peak linear and rotational acceleration numbers, we decrease risk. And so that's important. So the slip plane that MIPS provides, it's a little plastic liner that you guys are mostly familiar with. So when I put this helmet on and I tighten down the retention system, see how the helmet can move a little bit independently of my head? Well, MIPS helps with that. I have some hair. I don't have a lot of hair, but your hair and your scalp are natural slip planes. So they help decouple the helmet from your head as well. And so that's how they work, these rotational mitigating technologies. We use the head form, the Noxie head form that you guys saw. We don't put a wig, we don't put a hairnet on there. So the coupling between the head and helmet, a rubber head form with no hair, is pretty tight. If you use the hybrid 3 head form, that coupling would be even tighter. And so that makes a difference. And so when you do certain types of tests, whatever test rig you use, so whether you use the pendulum where we didn't have, big oblique impacts, we had, small off-center or non-centric hits. But when you do a test like on the bike tower for our bicycle and snow sport test where there's a big 45-degree anvil and we're landing on sandpaper, we are imparting lots of rotation to given helmet and head form, and the head form is freely moving, it's not attached to a neck. So that's going to make a difference into how effective these rotational mitigating technologies are, right? So if we impart lots of rotation, and that's what they're designed to do, and they're coupled really tightly with a hybrid 3 head form or a Noxie head form, they're probably going to look like they help quite a bit. If you look at our bike helmet ratings, most of the top rated helmets happen to have MIPS. We don't do separate testing to compare MIPS and non-MIPS versions. So we don't know that, but what else? So the type of test you do, oblique, non-oblique, are you using hair and a scalp? Are you using a hybrid 3 neck? All these things are going to make a difference into test results. So, I think the big question that, I saw with many of your listeners here is, does MIPS work over and above a full head of hair? And so again, if you had nice thick hair, I could use a little bit more, but if you had a full head of hair, does MIPS help over and above that? Because that's a big natural slip plane. Hair is almost frictionless, very low in friction. It contours to your head and it does a great job at that. And so our answer to that is it may, and it's probably related to, what location were you hit or was the impact? What energy level was that hit? What type of test rig did you really use? So all those things are going to play a factor in how effective MIPS is. Some people have asked me, well, if you bought a helmet, would you include MIPS? I'm like, well, all things considered, if I can have it MIPS and no MIPS and didn't really cost me much more, and I'm a heavy rider, sure, I'd include MIPS, but it wouldn't be my primary reason for choosing a helmet. But I don't think it can hurt. I think it's, if anything, it might help a little bit in certain situations. But again, it's really hard to quantify those things. So that's MIPS. And so I think you'll start to see some other technologies incorporated into the equestrian helmets besides MIPS. Again, there's other ones. You guys have probably all heard of wave cell. That's a different type of helmet structure. There's a company called 720, a European company that uses like a honeycomb structure, is choroid. So most helmets are made out of this EPS, hard dense foam. And so it's designed to crush, crumble, crack, and break on impact. If that energy threshold is not high enough for it to crush, crumble, crack, or break, then most of that energy is going to be transferred to your head. And so there's an opportunity to include maybe some softer padding to help those lower energy impacts, and that's kind of where we are. So that's MIPS. Any questions on MIPS that I can probably address right now and clear that up before we move on?
There is one.
Okay.
One that is MIPS, and I'm just sticking with MIPS here. So are you saying if the rider has lots of hair, they can go without MIPS?
Well, I'm saying, yeah, well, MIPS, a big head of hair is a natural slip plane. MIPS provides an artificial slip plane. So whether MIPS works over and above a full head of hair, it may be very specific to the location and energy of the given impact. But, your hair and your scalp are a pretty darn good slip plane. So again, it's hard to say that it wouldn't help. I don't think it would hurt. It may help a little bit, but it's probably not the end all be all of rotational technologies at this point in time, according to everything we've done and learned.
Let me see here.
But I'm not saying it's a bad technology. I think the concept's good, but again, it might be very location. And like I said, our bike helmets, we test with sandpaper onto a 45-degree anvil. And so and it's a free falling head form. So as that head form comes down and hits the anvil, it bounces off. And so we're measuring that. So that's a lot of rotation. So depending on how you hit your head, I guess your head's attached to your neck, I hope. But so it's all gonna make a little bit different. So the big scheme is it depends: energy, location, test rig, head form, neck, hair, are all going to be factors into evaluating how effective a given rotational technology performs.
Okay, so Sabrina and Ilana, both of your questions were just kind of covered by while he was typing. Let me just clarify, Barry. Would the value of a MIPS helmet differ according to the surface on which you're riding? That's one question.
Friction's important. That's why, like I mentioned, when we do the bike tower drop, we put sandpaper on there to simulate road grit, which is high in friction, right? It's pretty gritty. It doesn't give much. And so, we take into account, surfaces when we do all of our testing and all of our evaluations. Again, we want to best mimic real world accidents. And so we do a lot of work, figuring out where people hit their heads, how they hit their heads, what the surface is. And so we do lots of that. So the surface might be, quite important, and it might depend, again, in the location and the energy of how you hit your head. And, there's one other thing I didn't mention I should probably cover. So, these forward velocity test configurations, when you fall off your horse, there's probably a lot of bracing that goes on. I'm trying to hold on to the horse. I don't want to get, ticked off. But then when I hit the ground, oftentimes it's not my head that hits first. My rear, my chest, my shoulder, my back, an arm, and all those things are going to drastically slow down that forward velocity. So by the time your head hits the surface, that forward velocity is going to be very different than, what just the horse speed is. And so again, we would love to quantify that. We haven't been able to. And again, welcome new research and new advances. And if we think we need to include it, we will do so. But at this point in time, we didn't do that.
Right. Just a note to everybody putting all these wonderful questions in the chat. Just hang with us. I promise there were 800 people that registered and about 300 to 400 questions that came with those registrations. Most of you are asking questions that have already been put on our radar to ask tonight. So kind of hold hard a little and we'll get to it, I promise. But I'm gonna let Barry go on here because there is one good question here, though. I will say one question from Jessica is that, having examined other helmets for other sports, would a helmet for another sport be more effective in an equestrian setting? Or, in other words, are equestrian helmets actually better for equestrian purposes?
Good question. It's hard to compare sports. People often ask me, Barry, hey, if you knew you were going to fall off a horse, what kind of helmet would you wear? And I'd say, well, I'd probably wear a F7 football helmet. And I'll just bring that. I brought that in here. I wasn't gonna. It just happened to be here anyways. But the technology that goes into a football helmet, it's probably the most advanced sport helmet. You guys can see the thickness of the padding. There's different materials, structures, geometries. Football helmets, these guys hit their heads really hard and they do it repeatedly. And so there's, I think, some insights to be gained from how they mitigate high and low energy impacts. They don't use MIPS. The way they mitigate some of the rotational energy is the helmet shell is 2-piece, or it has a couple pieces here, just to give you a little heads up. So this helmet, so if I got hit here on this pressure plate, that part of the helmet's going to move a little independently before the rest of the helmet. Until it gets to the padding structures inside. And these all have these columns. These are all deformable, and they'll rotate and they'll bend and they'll twist. And so eventually all that energy gets to my head. But in the meantime, it absorbs energy linearly and helps absorb some of those rotational energies as well. So current football helmets are fantastic compared to when we first launched the ratings. When first ratings, there was only one 5-star helmet, and now you can't buy anything but a 5-star helmet. The star scores have drastically reduced, gotten better. And so there's no comparison from helmets of the last 5 years, even 3 years, to helmets, 5-10 years ago. So
was there a similar reaction and pushback in the world of football when the first ratings came out and there was only one 5-star? And did you kind of have the same
absolutely
reaction we're seeing here?
Dr. Duma can share stories, but yes, I mean, you're kind of, shaking up things as they are, as people understand them, but, including rotational accelerations in addition to linear, and creating a rating system where people can, see how helmets perform against one another instead of just the pass-fail certification standard. These are big advances. And so this project's a huge advance. Now you guys have more information.
Right.
And I know the Folksam study came up. We welcome other studies. When you guys go to buy a car, you go to Consumers Reports, you go to AAA, you go to Motor Trend, and all these ratings might be similar, but they might be different depending on how they test things. And we're no different. Folksam does good work. It's the methodology they use might be different than ours. I'd have to go through and dig deep, but I think they drop on a 45-degree anvil, and I think they have a free-falling head form. So it's different. Not right or wrong, just different. But I would take that information into consideration when making a helmet choice. We don't have to be the end all be all. We're just, we think we have a really good system. We think we're very representative of equestrian falls, and our system will continue to evolve as new information comes out. So that's our pledge to the equestrian community. That's what we were hired or funded to do. So I saw something. There is published research on the effectiveness of MIPS and other rotational technologies. I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm sure if you Google that, there are several articles on, how MIPS performs with hairnets, no hairnets, wigs, etc. And the conclusion is basically what I told you. May be very well dependent on type of test rig, location, energy, type of head form, neck, all those things I just mentioned. So.
Yeah. And the good news is that, and this is the middle of the webinar to mention this, but next Tuesday, the representative from MIPS is going to come and do a webinar with us also. So we're going to have a representative from Sweden and have the direct MIPS voice about things, not just this study, but MIPS in general.
About their technology. Yeah, sure. I mean,
this is the first time we reached out to them, and they were surprisingly really nice.
Again,
happy with us. So
Yeah.
who knew? One of the people I was asking, is it possible to schedule a visit to your lab?
Yes, you can always schedule a visit. We welcome everybody. All the helmet companies, they already know this, but they're welcome to come visit. They're welcome to come test prototypes, see firsthand how, we test helmets, see all the test rigs. Again, our goal is to help improve helmet performance, and by inviting them, open the lab up so they can see how it's done. And we'll help all the companies. We don't have, we don't play any favorites. If they want to come. We're happy to have you. Show you what we do, and we'll give you our insights into helmet performance and what we think of yours and how you might be able to improve it. So, I mean, we're not in the design of helmet business, but we certainly have seen lots of different things, and we're happy to help.
Why are equestrian helmets made as a single impact helmet when we could have multiple impact helmet? It's not like we only fall off once. Laugh out loud.
Good question. Kind of like bike helmets, snow sport helmets. You don't typically fall. And I will say, bike helmets, snow sport helmets, equestrian helmets, they do a really good job at attenuating high energy impacts, right? Because they do crack, crush, crumble, and break, just kind of like a crumple zone in your car before that energy gets to your head and moves your head, right? So you want that. You want them to crush, crumble, and break. If they don't, and the part of this research was, thought of, or we decided to do because there's tons of research says lots of concussions, no helmet damage. So the helmets are probably too stiff, or they don't have enough soft impact energy materials to absorb these lower energy that still cause concussions. So you very well could, maybe the whole industry moves to a multiple impact type helmet. Like I said, if I knew I was going to fall off a horse, I'd probably put that F7 football helmet on. It's 5 pounds.
Right.
But I think, as a community, safety should be first, aesthetics should be second. Not that you can't still glamorize, a bigger, slightly bigger, more protective helmet. But I think that's the evolution coming. And another thing I've talked with, several manufacturers and reps, if you had a practice helmet, maybe it's the practice plus performance helmet, and it's a little bit bigger, a little bit more robust than your competition helmet, because most of your risk is actually happening when you practice, when you're learning new things, and your horse is learning new things. You probably are more likely to fall off in those conditions than after you're skilled, and horses, you guys are all one, right? So they're still unpredictable. So maybe it's a practice helmet you wear most of the time, or maybe in general maybe the helmets just all get a little bit bigger, better performance. And again, I think this is the next phase. This is the evolution of helmets. Again, your helmets are safe right now, but there's lots of room for improvement as far as concussion risk. So that is how things are moving forward. That's the evolution.
Yeah. So. Question is, will you guys be posting the videos of the tests?
They're already on. We already have lots of videos of different impact tests. So if you go to YouTube and Google Virginia Tech helmet ratings, you'll see I have some lab tours, virtual lab tours. You'll see all the test rigs. We're not going to post every single helmet that ever gets hit.
Right.
Same thing over and over. It's not
I think
all
that might have been the intent, but no.
Yeah, if you see one,
a lot.
Yeah, even if you look at the football helmet impact, you'd see kind of what does it look like. I'm just putting a different helmet on. The positions are going to be different, and the energy is going to be different, but for the most part, the pendulum impactors, you'll see that test rig on YouTube or some of those virtual tours.
Definitely. So why don't we talk about the low impact and the history of it in the certification testing versus the experience you've had, how you designed your testing with it?
So energy level. So the certifications use, it's catastrophic head injury, right? Threshold for skull fracture and death. So that's the hugely important, right? You want the helmet to protect you from that first and foremost. And so you should all wear a helmet for one, and hopefully a certified helmet that protects you from those things previously mentioned. But, concussions can happen throughout a bigger range of energy levels, right? You got low energy, you can get a concussion. And so what we're really talking about is this, and I brought this in here. So this is a graphic. So you got linear acceleration on the horizontal axis, rotational acceleration on the vertical axis. So helmets that better reduce these acceleration values for a given impact are going to reduce risk. right? And so you definitely want to stay below that, that 130 G's of linear acceleration and probably below 6,000 radians per second squared. And so our whole, testing, helmet performance testing is all based on this. How well do these helmets attenuate energy, reduce these peak acceleration numbers, right? And as they do so, they reduce risk. So helmets that have lower peak linear and rotational acceleration numbers per the given impacts we do get better ratings based on, this is a real world, this is over 2 million data points. So we have a really good idea when these numbers get to certain levels, what your risk percent goes up. And so that is our risk function. That's on the web page. So, but that's the graphic visual of that. So, and maybe it's best, why don't we go through the equation, Emily?
Sure.
And then we can tell you how we weighted things and why we weighted things and how that goes and how you interpret the score.
Makes sense. Let's see. Now, how do I get you here? Yeah, we're going to hit this for a second, hit that for a second. All right, Barry, you're becoming the host for a sec, so you can share your screen.
Oh, all right. Let me. So I got to probably.
Bottom of the screen, the share screen, the green button.
Do I want? Let's see. One participant can share. I'll do that.
There you go.
You guys can see that?
Half of it. Yeah, there you go. Got it.
I think it's because, let me drag it over. Let me shrink it. That better?
Yep.
Okay, so, well, here's kind of the design of the equestrian test methods, right? So we did all the video analysis and research papers of equestrian falls and figure out how do people fall and hit their heads? What's the location? What's the energy level? If we could quantify that. Then we went into the lab, we did a bunch of system comparisons of the different drop tests, drop tower, pendulum impactor, portable pendulum, linear impactor. We did a bunch of helmets, locations, energy levels. We did a bunch of that. On-site field testing. So we actually went to the equestrian facility, as I mentioned, dirt, sand, grass. We did some G ratings, and we even measured the new footing that they put in our equestrian facility. They put in a footings first.
Yep.
Which is really nice stuff. And surfaces is another different conversation, but and then impact surface comparison. So we did that impact or surface comparison. We did that. And then this is where we get to the star equation. So this is where we ended up. And so the equestrian star. So star stands for the summation of tests for the analysis of risk. And I'll explain this. So we have two sum signs here. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yep.
So we got the sum of these, which are the three locations, and the two energy levels or velocities as they're noted here. And so you got exposure is a function of the location and the velocity. All right, and that's going to be multiplied by the risk, which is the function of the linear and rotational acceleration numbers. So for each test condition, right, so low energy, side location, it's what I miss. So test condition ones, right? So side, low energy, and we do 2 trials per and we average them. So that's going to, when we multiply these things, we're going to get exposure times risk. We're going to get an incidence value, right? Risk is really going to be the percentage of risk of a concussion, right? Based on those numbers. And we're going to get an incidence value for that. So we add these all up for these different 6 test conditions, and then we get an overall star score. So, and then the risk function is down here, and that's the graphic I just showed you. It's a function of what that looks like. Really fancy math, and it's optimized for that. So that's really technical, but so every time we do an impact test, right, we start with weighting everything equally. The location's 1, the velocity's 1. All right. And then because the risk is really what we're after, what's the risk of a concussion based on that energy level and location? So we do that for all the test conditions. All right. So those are the absolute values. So is there any questions on the STAR equation at this point in time?
Hold on, I gotta blow it back up to be able to see.
Yeah.
Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, because you're sharing the screen, I can't quite see the chat, but let me try and pull it over here. I think I can. Hold on. Nope. Let's just keep going. We'll answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'll make sense in a second here. So again, for every test condition, we come up with an incidence value, and it's based on the exposure, which is based on location and velocity. And we start the equation with weighting everything equally. All right, so location doesn't matter, velocity doesn't matter. We're going to weight them equally just to see where these risk numbers and these incidence values end up. Okay. So we use 40 helmets. So we have 40 of these absolute risk numbers. All right. And so we have that, and we start looking at, all right, so we start applying weighting factors, and this is done for all the sports and different things we do. So weighting factors are then assigned so that each location was more equally represented. So if you looked at the absolute risk spread for every helmet, you would note that the front location had very, very small contributions to the overall risk of a given helmet. So you want obviously low risk, right? Because it represents, the frequency of concussion. So you want these numbers low. But when we looked at side, we looked at front, and we looked at back, the front of the helmet had a very low representation, a very low input as far as the overall STAR score or incidence values for that helmet. So you can hit your head in an infinite number of ways. And to ensure that helmets are manufactured and designed for any given location, we want to make sure those are better represented. So we actually apply weighting so that every location is somewhat equally represented. That makes sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So, because you could hit your head anywhere, we want to cover our bases there. We want the helmets to make sure they're designed and built for that. But we have to weight those because, the front of the helmets tend to do really well, and we just don't have a lot of risk there, but we definitely wanted it represented. So the impact energy, so the velocity of these impacts. So we know that people fall off their horses and injure themselves with low energy impacts a lot more frequently than the high energy, right? I mean, it's just the frequency is much higher, and the literature shows that. So we want to weight these lower energy impacts higher than the high energy, right? So we decide to weight those 3-to-1, which the research kind of shows. So then we normalize all the data. So we take all those, we weight those, and then we look at them, and then we normalize all these into, so the average helmet has a STAR score of 1.0. So you have some helmets that would be below 1, the high performing helmets, and you'd have some that would be above 1. So that is normalized based on all those weighting factors, right? And then we decide to multiply all of them by 5 just to spread the scores and make them more understandable, because who understands a 0.25? Not many people. And so we multiply it by 5 to spread the scores and make them more reasonable to understand. And so now what the STAR score represents, and this is at the bottom here, let me scroll down, and then I'll kind of go back to, so the STAR score represents the average number of concussions you would get wearing that helmet model if you're exposed to the 30 test conditions modeled in the lab. And so it's really the function of those 6 test conditions that we mentioned, 3 locations, 2 energy levels, right? But then we multiplied by 5. So that's what the STAR score represents. You want low STAR scores because that's really the average number of concussions. Right. So it's kind of the opposite of a math test. On a math test, you want like a 95 out of 100. Well, here it's kind of like golf. You want a low score that puts you into the best category, A, B, C, D. And in our case, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. An A is a 5, a B is a 4, right? So the STAR score is what really drives everything. And we just put you into these bins of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. So after we do all that, so what is the cutoff? What should we decide? What's the reasonable thing to make a cutoff for a 5-star helmet? well, we look at how the scores kind of look and what's reasonable based on these initial 40 helmets in the test matrix, right?
Mhm.
And so a 50% reduction. So you have the average helmets of 5. And if we reduce that score by 50%, we get 2.5.
Mhm.
So helmets that have a star score of 2.5 or less are now considered 5 stars. And then we did increments of basically 1.25, 50% on up. So that's how it works. So helmets that are less than 2.5 or 5s, 375 to 251 are basically 4s. Again, less than 5 to, so there's ranges there. Does everybody understand that?
Yes and no. So here's our question. Are we measuring for risk for a concussion versus risk for a severe TBI?
We are concussion risk. So this all goes back to this risk function, this graphic, right?
Right.
Saw me. It goes
No,
back
they
to
can't
that
see you,
risk
still
function.
screen share.
So helmets that better reduce linear and rotational acceleration numbers reduce concussion risk. The
Mhm.
catastrophic head injuries are kind of already not that we don't have a high energy impact, because again, 15 of those 30 test conditions are high energy impact, similar to some of the certification standards.
Mhm.
But we didn't weight those as heavily as the low energy, right? But they're still in there. And so, but by and large, yes, our ratings basically say, which helmets better reduce these head accelerations and reduce injury risk as it relates to concussion. So
Theoretically, what is the max star score? Is it 30? And
it'd be 30. Yep, it'd be 30.
would we expect the condition of not wearing a helmet at all to score a 30?
Probably not. Some of those low energy impacts, you might not get a concussion from those.
Mhm.
I don't remember what, we have to look and see what the bare head form would look like, but
Sure.
but without a helmet on, it's pretty severe.
Right.
Those numbers really jump up if you have no helmet on. But
were there any ANOVA or statistical analysis done of the helmet results to determine if there were statistical differences between the helmet ratings or star levels? This question has to do with the measurement error in the tests.
there is no statistical analysis of variance. Basically, we look at how the star scores shake out. So that's basically how we're looking at that. So these absolute risk numbers are based on that risk function. And then they get it based on the weightings and the location and exposure. We do all the weightings and all that. And so you get a star score. And so we're really looking at the dispersion of those star scores and then saying, all right, so, if they were all packed really tight, maybe we might have ranked them differently, but there was definite separation between the 5-star or the top performing ones. And it happened to be at about 50% reduction. So, so it's really the star score you want to focus on. I mean, it's great if they're 5-star or 4-star helmets, but the star score really tells you a lot more information.
Yeah, no, definitely. You're good right now. You have another couple slides, I think.
Okay. So that's pretty much, if you understand the star equation, you got to that point. So this is kind of how they shook out. So, so these front locations didn't have as much weighting as the side locations. So we obviously weighted some of those. Can't remember if that was after the application of the weightings or not, but
right.
That just a little visual. So yeah, so the methodology paper can be found under technical documents if you guys want to look at that.
Yep.
The certification standards are also, there's a little table of what certification measures what and what threshold for passing are. And again, certainly want to thank Jacqueline Mars and the major organizations, USHJ, USCF, USCA for helping us get this done. So I think we really look forward to seeing what improvements, what advancements are made and how fast they come. We've seen this in all the other sports we cover for the most part. So it'll be fun to watch. And as they develop, then, then I would start considering, maybe it's time to upgrade my helmet. I don't think you need to jump out and be a little crazy and feel like you have to do something now, unless you need a new helmet.
Right.
But
that is part of what people are asking, in that some do need a helmet and are looking for the guidance on what to do. So here, okay, so this question, sorry. Do we know the difference in star score that is clinically significant, i.e. a p-value?
No, it's basically all on risk, that risk function. So what are your chances of getting a concussion based on that 2 million data point risk function? So it's not, we don't really do it in p-values.
Okay. Here, do me a favor, switch me back to host. There should be a way to hit the little dots and change me back to host. That way I can figure out where I am. I know. There we go. Should be good. No, still there. Can you find me and the three dots?
I stopped sharing. Oh, do I
Yeah,
need to?
no, go to, can you see me on your list of people?
I do.
Okay, so up, if you put the cursor on picture of me, you'll see three dots in the corner, and then say make host.
My bad.
Ah, it's all
There
good.
you go.
All right, there we go. All right, so then we'll put you.
Got to put you back in charge. Sorry.
Yes, but I just put you back in spotlight. So
Oh,
now we're
boy.
back in vision. Okay. So question, earlier you mentioned that the effectiveness of MIPS wasn't well represented in the test because the angular velocity, which is more likely to cause rotational type of injury, which is also understood to be a significant contributor to concussions, was not tested. In your graph, I believe I noticed rotational velocity on the y-axis. How much rotational velocity was created in the test? Great question.
It's hard to say how much rotational accelerations caused by the impact locations and the angles we did. I don't know if I can answer that, but obviously we measure that.
Right.
And so for, we're comparing all these things. So, if you can, for a given impact, as long as you can try to keep these rotational accelerations, these radians per second squared, minimized, then you're going to get a better ratings. And I would say, I think, Mark, when you looked at the data in general, the helmets that performed the best, got the better ratings and the star scores, generally perform better on the lower energy impacts.
Mhm.
And, part of that's because we weight them more heavily, right?
Right.
And so, but in general, the helmets that were a little bit softer actually did a little bit better as far as concussion risk, which kind of makes sense, right?
Right.
So.
Question from, this is for me, for myself, based on the input of a lot of other people's questions. We noticed that the top 15 or so helmets in the ratings all seem to have brims that I felt like if I had to with a friend, I could like grab onto it and snap it off. Is there, and the helmets that have the brims built into one piece are a little bit further down. I did notice in one of your other interviews from this study that you said that equestrian helmets should rethink about having the all-in-one brim. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to finish this thought. I know that in some of the certifications that these helmets have attained, they do test the brims. They are working inside of the standards about snap off that they're supposed to. But I also know that in England, you're not allowed to compete in eventing on a cross-country course in a hat that is got a brim. You have to wear a skull cap. So kind of where do you slide on this now that you've played with 40 helmets? You made the comment, so kind of asking for the follow-up.
Well, yeah, a brim certainly could make a difference depending on where you hit your head. We didn't hit the brim specifically because the 30 degree forward tilt kind of misses the brim. Then our side location, we don't really hit the brim either. It might change the, built-in brim versus no brim may change the geometry a little bit. It's hard to say until we really dug deep into those two helmet models of, similar types. But, the break-off brim I think is advantageous. So if it breaks off when you hit the ground, that's probably a good thing. Obviously, that would create a lot of friction if you happen to hit your head and it caught the brim and dug into the grass or soil or whatnot. So, the venters don't use them for a reason, right? So,
Right.
But yeah, certainly brim geometry, all these small differences could make differences in helmet performance based on location and energy of a given impact.
Okay, we have couple questions here. Were you able to get data from USEF, which is reported by stewards, technical delegates, et cetera, to help factor the types of falls that are being seen into the data, or is it just observationally based off the videos?
We do have injury reports, but they're not very conclusive because they don't quantify anything. We don't really have video to back up that injury report. I fell off my horse and hit my head forward, but until we see it and know, what was the angle? It's hard to glean too much without having video to support what we think happened. And I hope I answered that question.
No, you did.
Yeah. So, but sometimes you can get to location. That's helpful, but you don't know if that was they hit their head first, or they hit they fall on their shoulder, or then hit their head, or they put a hand out, a knee out. So it's not complete, in other words. So we do the best we can with the information we get, and henceforth that's why the 100+ advanced video analysis we did was that's something we could quantify and go with.
This is probably being covered now, but what are some possible common design features that contribute to better star ratings, i.e. brims, materials, constructions? I know it was not the study endpoint, but just curious.
Yeah, I think softer and maybe a variety of materials instead of we happened to cut a couple helmets in half just so you guys can kind of see. So this is cut in half. So that's basically just EPS foam. This helmet, I don't know if you guys can see that. So I can deform this one. This one's a little bit, see how I can press my thumb there?
Yeah.
That one's a little bit more deformable than this lower performing helmet, right? So I can't really, if I push my thumb on there, let me go this way. This one doesn't deform as easy. So softer is probably going to be better. It still has to pass the certification standard, right? So that's catastrophic injury. So
Right.
the next level is, how can we soften these up? Maybe you do different layers of material. They don't have to be one big solid piece of EPS foam. There's other materials and structures. Geometries might make a big difference. These honeycomb structures tend to do pretty well.
Right.
There's a product called Rheon as well, Coroid. Like I mentioned, I think 720 out in Europe. I think there's lots of possibilities for those structures and how they mitigate energy, both linear and rotational. Cost, I don't know what they would cost, or manufacturing, and how thick they would have to be to do that. That's all the excitement of moving things forward. So
Right. Have you had conversations since the release of the results that have made you come out and say, wow, these guys are listening. This is looking hopeful for the next step down the road? Or did you kind of find that there were maybe some more reactions that were more shut off than you had hoped?
Mostly positive. People that I've talked to said, oh, I get it now. And I said, you're going to sell a lot more helmets and they're going to be better and they're safer. This is an opportunity for improvement now that you have a blueprint for design changes. Obviously the equestrian community wants safer helmets, and can we advance these things over and above the catastrophic head injury that they protect from now? So and I think when they start looking at other helmet technologies, like from the football helmets and maybe even some of the bike helmets, you're going to start to see, oh, you know what, maybe we can incorporate that with our equestrian helmets. So I think there's lots of opportunity for advancement and improvements, and so we'll see where it goes.
That makes sense. Were there any brands that came out to you and were like, okay, now what do we do? We did not do well.
I don't think so. A lot of them, are a little perplexed how their helmets performed, but the biggest takeaway is now that we've included rotational acceleration and linear acceleration, there's an interaction between those variables. And it's not always easy because energy has to go somewhere, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed. And so for a given impact, maybe it did well on the linear acceleration, that maybe at the expense of the rotational or vice versa. So this interaction is not easy to tease out sometimes. But now that we've measured it, we know they're both important and they both contribute to concussion risk. So we need to try to minimize both of them as best we can. So and maybe you don't do that simultaneously. Maybe you drop linear a little bit and rotation stays the same, or vice versa, depending on what materials and what structures you put in there to change that or modify that. So it gets a little. It sounds easy. When I say maybe just incorporate new materials, new geometries, but there's a lot that goes into it. These companies work hard to try to make the best and safest helmets at a reasonable price.
And that actually leads in nicely to one of these questions. I think this might have been one of the higher number of repeats I've seen, is that did you get at some point any more or less surprised in the variance of cost for the helmets that did well versus the cost for the helmets that were further down the list?
We typically see that price isn't always indicative of helmet performance. Sometimes you get a couple models that are cheaper in price that just happen to have the right geometry or the right density, where the vent holes are and how it, for those locations, how it actually attenuated energy. Maybe it might not be as durable of a helmet. So in other words, it does fall apart or break apart during our impact testing, which again, the crumple zone in your car is there for a reason. If the helmet cracks, crumbles, and breaks, if you just happen to drop it off your desk chair, that's one thing, right? And so you may not want that helmet, but we do see a variety of price points. And if you looked at our bike helmet ratings, I'd encourage you to go there and you'll see some really good bike helmets, high performing bike helmets at $65, $75. And obviously some of the other ones are a lot more than that. So the geometry, density, the right EPS. I mean, there's some, I don't know, I can't say they're lucky, but they just happen to have the right, design for the impact test that we conducted.
Yeah. Let me try and access all my key questions we haven't touched yet. So what is the next step for you guys? We've done 40 helmets. Are we doing more on the exact same parameters? Are we adjusting parameters with feedback from outside sources? What is next for you guys?
So we'll continue to add models. We already have 5 to 10 models in the lab that we haven't tested yet. And so our ratings are rolling. So as we get new helmets in here and we test, we post them to the website. And we do this in perpetuity for all the helmet ratings. So there won't be a methodology change until we have, really concrete and quantitative data that says we need to evolve or change something. That may take a while, but, this is a great first step. And, again, it gets things moving. It may not be the end all be all as far as helmet testing and evaluation, but it's a huge step forward. And this is where we are at this point in time, kind of like, cars.
Yeah.
Auto driving cars are coming next. You may not even have to drive. We're not there yet, but, pretty soon it's happening. So it's just the evolution of safety and where we're moving. And this is, again, a great first step. And we're thankful that we got a chance to do it and help you guys. And I'm glad that the USJA and all those other organizations funded it.
So let me try and pop through. There's a lot of questions here. One question we had before, I know when you showed us the head form, actually, can you grab the Noxie and hold it up for a second?
Yep.
And tilt it kind of towards the camera so we're looking at the top of the skull? There you go. So as you said, when you held it before, it is more oval shaped, and yes, it does resemble your skull. But there are a number of people wondering about, and initially they had thought that it was more of a round shape that had been used, and now I'm seeing it's oval. People have round heads, oval heads, and every variance in between and around. The question they have is, should there be a more round model tested that, because some helmets fit a certain shape, some don't. Is that a lacking, or is it something that needs to be adjusted?
Now, the head forms we use are pretty representative of a wide variety of shapes in the head forms. And again, fit is not as critical as you might think. It's really the impact attenuation characteristics of a given helmet. Some people have, some helmet models, when they manufacture these, each one probably has their own template of, exactly what's their market, what's culturally speaking, certain cultures have more rounder heads, some have longer oval head shapes, just depending on where you live in the world. So, I imagine it's possible there could be slight differences in, if we changed the head form and made it completely round and did all round helmets, but in general, it's pretty, our results are very generalizable to the large population. So, and that's the goal, right? So,
Yeah.
And again, our helmet ratings, and I probably didn't mention this, but these ratings are really good for all types of equestrian activities: walking your horse, trotting, cantering, galloping, jumping. I don't think they're probably they could be used for horse racing, but again, that's probably a little different. The forward velocity in horse racing is pretty unique, and maybe not the best for polo, because what they do is a little different. But for the most part, everybody walks, gallops, trots their horses, and occasionally jumps, depending on what your discipline is. So these helmets are a great overall rating for, most activities related to equestrian sports.
So let me try and bridge the gap here, because I've seen this question written and you've seen the spreadsheet I sent you with all the questions and how they were written. I think people are getting a little hung up on the fit of the helmet and the head form, because we have all gone through extensive trial and error fittings, having people that know how to fit a helmet. And when you actually put a human skull inside of a helmet, the fit matters, because it is the only thing that's going to most protect us from the impact. But whereupon in your testing, when you put a helmet and secure it to a head form, the way that you got the sensors, the test, the ability to control the parameters more specifically than an unexpected accident, I think we're losing people on why fit of a helmet is not as important in a lab. It's not the same as putting your life, your brain on the line.
No, what we're saying is, exact helmet fit. There's no research that shows that, helmet fit changes helmet performance to any large extent. So again, a slightly loose helmet versus a slightly tight helmet. Maybe it's a little loose on the sides. For the most part, that helmet's going to perform about the same, right? And the big goal, so I think I mentioned this, but the primary goal of a helmet is to stay in place and protect you from that initial impact. After that initial impact, it's okay to decouple from your head and move and slide all around. You probably don't want it to come all the way off, but that's exactly, you want it to decouple. And so a helmet needs to be comfortable that you want to wear it, right? So it's not bouncing around, so you can actually see what you're doing. It can't be too tight where you're pre-compressing the material and it's not comfortable to wear. But everyone's head shape's a little bit different, and different models, different brands have different templates or molds they use. So again, try to find a helmet that you like, that fits, that's decently rated, and is appropriate for the type of riding you're going to do. If you're a high-end eventer, then you probably want it triple, certified by all the crush and the rigidity, the hazards, and et cetera. So it depends on what you do and how you ride, and just like any other thing you buy, like, well, what am I going to use this for? Is it every day?
Right.
Do I count on this, or is it I'm a casual rider? And so, use all those things into making your helmet choice.
Right. And that's, definitely what people want, is to have the safest on their head. And you've gone a long way to helping us understand that there's more parameters and more discovery and more research and more designing.
So again, I think helmet fit is not as critical as far as impact attenuation and protection as you might think. Again, it needs to be somewhat comfortable, like I said, slightly loose to maybe slightly snug, makes it feel like, it fits around your head as best you can, but different models are going to be better for your head shape. So there's a little bit of variety, but again, these are, generally speaking, you just want to make sure it, basically fits. And I know the helmet manufacturers and the reps do a great job trying to get you guys into the helmets that are, if you wear your hair up or wear it down or whatever. So, listen to those guys. They're pretty good at figuring out, what helmet model and shape and how does it feel comfortable and what kind of ride you're doing. You can't have it bouncing around, et cetera. So,
right. I don't want to forget this one, because I've gotten a bunch of this. We used a male head form in testing. There are people asking about youth and female head forms and any difference / value to changing it up and using them?
Well, most labs use either a 50th percentile hybrid 3 male head form or a NOXY 50th percentile male head form, just because that's the broadest population. Helmet performance is probably, it's hard to say, exactly for sure for each helmet model, but they probably perform similarly for any given helmet size and head form. Obviously, when you change the head form, you got to change the sliding mass. You got to do a bunch of different calculations for all these things that actually make it appropriate for that size. We would love to do a youth. I mean, that's one area. We have a youth bike helmet study. We're trying to get a youth hockey helmet one, but a youth equestrian might be appropriate. And the biggest reason why is, they're not just small adults. The threshold for injury for a youth is different than an adult. The energy levels are much lower to cause concussions. So that may be, and I don't know how old some of these kids are when they first start riding, but youth helmets in the cycling world been around a while, and so we would love to do a youth bike helmet study too, instead of just we have football. Yeah, so we're looking for hockey and bike helmets.
So that leads to the question: do these standards based on a 50th percentile male head form apply on the junior helmets to people who have small heads or children?
Ooh, that's a good question. The standards pretty much use a 50th percentile head form, pass or fail to a given threshold level. I mean, they could probably be more precise as related to youth helmets or adolescent helmets. I don't think the standards do anything with those, to my knowledge. I could be wrong.
Standards have to use the head form that matches the helmet size, is what Stephanie Bonin has just commented.
So the certification, some of the standards do have youth head forms and criteria.
Waiting for an answer. Stephanie, yes, no. Danielle says weights.
No. So I didn't look into that, or I'm not familiar with that because we were just looking at adults
right
for this project. But I don't know. I'll put it on my search list to see if I don't know if the standards have those or not. I don't remember seeing them, but again, I wasn't looking for youth at any point in time. So
they have a broad range of sizes that don't say youth, but a size that matches.
Well, the head form should match. Yeah, the head form size should match the helmet, but I don't know what the threshold changes for passing if they modify those as well based on, that's a different energy level depending on, you have a small head form and a small helmet and you drop it from the same height. Well, that's a different energy level for a given impact, right? So I don't know if they modify those. I like I said, haven't looked at that.
Got it. More question about the fact that equestrian sports are mostly female and using the female head form. Hang on, let me just get to my good one. Did you identify or have a hypothesis on any helmet components or design aspect among the helmets tested that may indicate better performance? i.e., was there a minimum padding width, foam type, exterior material that you noticed a trend?
Like I said, some of the higher performing helmets had EPS that was a little bit more pliable, a little softer than some of the really bad ones, or poor performing, I should say. But again, we just finished this, and so we haven't dug in. We haven't looked at all the haven't had conversations with all the helmet companies and their specific models and looked at the data, and then even grabbed the helmets, and we can start figuring some of that out. So that'll come here very soon.
That makes sense. There was a good question earlier. Let me come back to where it was. I'm just trying to go through the chat to find it. Do brims affect neck injuries?
They could, depending on how you hit your head. If that brim was to be embedded in the soil and took your head with it, you might have some extreme ranges of motions in a very short period of time. So possible. And again, probably very location and energy specific. So, when we do other testing, sharp edges usually are not helpful in helmet performance. No. They create friction. Obviously, they catch whatever surface a little easier than smooth surfaces. And so but I don't know how often you hit your head or your brim. But yeah, certainly could make a difference.
Mm-hmm. The study sample was 100 videos. How were the 100 videos found / gotten to you? Were they researched and found by your team, or were they provided by the people funding?
Research and found by our team for the most part. I don't know if we got any from the USHJ or, but the criteria is we got to have it's got to be a decent quality. We got to be able to quantify and see what we need to see, where they fell from. So, we want to make sure they were each unique. Most of these were obviously captured from official equestrian events. You don't get some random person filming a video and happen to send it to you. These were probably published via some national organization. So,
no, I was just curious because there's some people saying that 100 is not quite enough, and that if you didn't see a lot of high speed falls, you might have missed a discipline or two because prone to high speed falls.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. And 100 videos to do advanced video analysis is time consuming. It's not as easy as some people think. It's not like, you're calculating things, you're measuring, you're trying to find reference points in the video that you could measure something against, documenting everything that happened, the leg first, what was the angle, what was, there's lots of, so it's a little more detailed than you might think. And 100's a lot. Other sports we analyze, it's hundreds. I mean, if you look at any research, 100's a lot,
right?
As far as video analysis, but again, we're happy to keep analyzing, keep looking, and keep advancing. The test metrics if we need to, and so we're not stuck with this, but we had to stop somewhere and get this out there so we could continue the movement forward.
Right. So we have helmets coming. You have 5 to 10 in the lab now.
Yeah.
And I am working on the theory, and I don't want to make assumptions. Are you working through all of the ones sold in the US progressively? Or is there a finite, we're only doing these helmets and then there's these that are going to be excluded?
No, we'll include anything commercially available. If we can get our hands on it, and a lot of the manufacturers already contacted me and said they'd like to get more models included. So we're happy to do that, and we do have time limitations, but there's lots of helmets on the market. But the other thing we all often ask is, we don't want to test a helmet that you're getting ready to discontinue, because that doesn't save us. Yeah, it's not worth our time, and it's not helpful for the consumer. So
right.
I think now that we've launched, and you're going to start to see some design changes, and they're going to retool some of these helmet models and come out with new ones. So that would be the exciting thing, is the new helmet models with advancements that we'll try to test and rate. But we'll continue to add them as best we can. Those that are still currently available. But I've heard lots of models being discontinued before we even got to this point, or back ordered, and
right.
Just can't get them in a timely manner. And again, unfortunately, we need 4 samples of the exact same size, exact same finish, and that's harder than I thought.
Oh, actually, that was a question. Two of the helmets that I actually wear, the Trauma Void Lynx and the Trauma Void EQ3, and actually the Partis as well, and a couple other models offer a plastic and a microfiber or something like that version. Your results, not that I could find, did not mention it. I mean, the picture looks like it's plastic, but were they only tested in plastic, or did you hit a microfiber here and there that is not pixelated?
Is that the liner, the comfort liner?
No,
You're
not
talking about the shell?
No, on the outside exterior.
Well, we tried to, whatever we can get our hands on, we tried to go with glossy, smooth glossy finish.
Got it.
That usually tests the best and easiest to get as far as the number of samples.
Right.
So whatever's on the website. So if it was a matte finish and that's all we could get, then we went with a matte finish.
Right.
But we tried to standardize that with all the models. Not all the models come in the glossy.
Right.
Granted, it probably won't have much difference between a glossy and a matte, but we just want to standardize as best we can.
But what about if it has a fabric exterior?
Well, I don't know. guess we might have had some with fabric.
You have a couple here. From looking at the pictures, it looks like you had the IRH Medalist, which is velvet. You had the Troxel ES, which has a coating, and you've got the Charles Owen AR8 that has, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling back up. Yeah, AR8 Plus has not shiny plastic.
Okay.
Is
That's
there?
good. I mean, yeah, we included a little variety. I mean,
Yeah.
so it is, we could get what we could get, and we want to include them all. So they all, you know, it'll be interesting when we get all versions of every helmet and
Right.
see some slight differences.
And okay, so this is a question that's goofy and I thought up. Did you have a favorite helmet in the study?
I did not. I tried them. I tried most of them on just to see how they fit, how they feel.
Mhm.
I did not have a favorite helmet per se.
Did they all fit you?
They all, well, I'm pretty sure I tried almost all of them. I'm not saying I got all 40 in, but they all usually fit me. Because I'm pretty close to this guy right here. So we got a lot of similarities.
Okay, so that might be cheating a little,
Yeah.
but okay. Well, anybody else have it? Let's see. Okay. In other sports, what has the timeline been in seeing manufacturers introduce new models that have an improved star rating?
Pretty fast. You'd be surprised. I can't speak for the equestrian helmet manufacturers, but bike helmets move really quick. So I guess it just depends on how much they value. But I think your demand from your community and all the riders, you guys want better, safer helmets, and so I think they'll respond quicker. They want to sell you better helmets. They want to get better helmet ratings. They want to make the best helmets they can too. I mean, everybody's in this to improve helmet safety and and save the sport from any injuries if we can. So everyone's got a vested interest in this. So I think you'll see some improvements pretty quick.
Do you have any comments about the risk of a helmet for hoof strikes once the person's on the ground or hitting a jump on the way down? Because obviously those are added elements to factor.
Yeah, we didn't do any hoof impact replications. We did a bunch of tests on the different anvil types, just to see, what the difference is between, a hazard anvil, equestrian, or a hemisphere, a hazard, equestrian hazard, and like a side impact, and what's worse. And so we looked at some of that. From the helmets we tested and the velocity we tested, the side impact with a flat impactor face, I don't know if I mentioned we used a flat impactor face, was really the worst case scenario. And the reason for that, for the most part, is there's so much surface area that hits you all at once. You don't have any focal deformation of the helmet. It all just gets taken with it simultaneously and doesn't have a lot of time to attenuate that energy. Versus like the hemisphere, and it's like a little golf ball shaped, or the hazard anvil, those are very focal. And so I think the helmet deforms a little bit prior to that energy being transferred to the rest of the helmet in your head. And so those weren't quite as bad. They were similar, but the flat surface to the side of your head was still probably the worst impact scenario. As far as acceleration numbers go.
That was in Emma's video in August. It was,
I think we mentioned. I think Stefan went over that. Yep.
Yeah, because that has all the pictures of all the different things, and that didn't look
hazard anvils, and there's a lot of information in that presentation if you can go through it.
Everybody wants to know, is this going to be, and I apologize, my terminology might be off here, submitted for peer review or a manuscript put out? And if so, when do we expect to see that?
Good question. I know we're in the writing process. I don't know if it's been completely submitted. I think we're following up with a couple items, but sooner the better. I mean, I don't know how long, depending on where we submit it for publication, but it'll be out there. It is going to be peer reviewed. We're very proud of the research, all the research that went into this. It was a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of money. And so we definitely want to publish that. And again, that helps advance the industry forward as well. And if you don't publish any of this information, people can't look at it and see, what you did, how you did it, and, get peer reviewed to make sure it's, good, then you don't really move the needle. So like I said, we're always looking for forward velocity research, and it's not out there yet. So So,
Yeah.
so hopefully all that will get published and maybe we can reanalyze and look at things and evolve if we need to.
That sounds good. I think we might have crossed almost all the check boxes I had. I'm sure that people might not love that we didn't ask all of the 300 questions, but I mean, I think we've covered most of the things. Let's see.
I see one question there about why did MIPS perform so poorly? Well, MIPS was in the best rated helmet and some of the poor rated helmets. And per my previous discussion, it may not always make a difference whether a helmet has or does not have MIPS, based on the test rig you use, the location, the head form, hair, no hair, neck, and all these other factors. So it's hard to say. Again, our goal was not to compare MIPS and non-MIPS versions of lots of different helmet models based on our test protocol. So we evaluate the whole helmet, whether it has MIPS or not, and some of them did, some of them didn't. And they rated how they rated. So until we have complete pairs of all these, we wouldn't know for sure.
Right. And there were some questions about, was there any thoughts on the ones that are identical helmets, one that had MIPS, one that did not, that performed differently? Like, I think 1K was in that boat.
So are they, well, it's hard to say if they're identical, MIPS and non-MIPS versions. They could have been.
True.
And we find this also. So there's different production runs of helmets, and we don't know for sure what environmental conditions these helmets have been through, like sitting in a hot warehouse. So we have found differences in same helmet models from different production runs, different production dates. The formula of the EPS may not always be the most consistent, but we have found differences. We don't know why, but our testing is pretty reliable and doesn't vary much. And so, but we have noticed that in a few different helmet models. So for bikes and a couple other things we've done. So.
No, yeah. That sounds good. And I think we're at the point, we're right around an hour and 25. So.
Oh boy.
That was a long one, but worth it. And I, really appreciate it. I know everybody else here is saying lots of thank yous. Everybody appreciates the dedication of your team and the fact that you exist. We're
working for you guys. We have nothing to hide. We have no conflicts of interest. We're just trying to help the industry and you guys, advance helmets to the next level of safety. So we're happy to do it. And Emily, if you have follow-up questions that you get, and then there's, I'll let you summarize those, and I'm happy to address those. Make it the same one over and over and over. Just maybe something.
I know we'll try and
lack of clarity.
Narrow it down.
But I hope I conveyed everything clearly and concisely and in an understandable way. If I need to go over something again, I'm happy to do so. But
no worries. I think you did a great job, and you've always put your email out before. Do you want it out again, or should we hide it now?
Oh, they can find it on the website. So let them do a little homework. I'm right on the website. Yeah. B-Miller21, B-Miller21 BT. Yeah,
we're gonna put that in size 72 font and post it on the group every day for a week. All your questions go there.
I can't guarantee I'll get back to you in a timely manner, but I try to answer all emails as best I can. So.
I don't know. Before you were done this thing, you responded to emails very fast.
Yes.
Now the lag time, I mean,
it goes in cycles, right? Yeah.
That actually was the question. What you guys are supposed to work on air vests.
Well, we have a proposal out. We know that air vests are a big safety concern. The testing standards for them, we believe, could be very much improved. Air vests versus standard vests, how you actually test it. So we are looking forward to trying to get that funded. I know the USHJ and a couple other entities have that proposal from us. It's a lot more complicated than helmets, I can tell you that. Dr. Duma has a lot of big background in auto research where they do seat belts and torso rib cage injuries. And so that comes in quite handy for what this would entail. Obviously, Dr. Rosen has a strong background as well, and they've done a bunch of stuff together. So I think we have the right people to do this research. So we'll see what happens. But we'd love to add that to your organization, your community, to see if we can help improve
There's
those, or at least have a better way to evaluate them. So,
yeah, okay, we've got, all right, whoever's got Samsung S901U, I will post the website that Barry's email is on is the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab website, which Google will get you to.
yep.
And Dr. Duma's PowerPoint, is that in the equestrian materials list, Barry?
I don't think it's on the website.
Okay, I have it.
You have it.
So it's
yeah.
on my Facebook group. So
And I can always send it along, but
yeah,
maybe we can include, maybe I'll have to see if we can include that to the website.
I don't know, but I can include it on the Facebook group. It
Okay.
is there. We'll share it again.
Oh,
So
that'd be good.
anybody
Yeah,
who's not on the Facebook MIPS group, just search MIPS Equestrian Helmets on Facebook and you will find us.
All right.
And we will share off the relevant data and what have you. Oh, it's Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Sorry. I can send it to you, Kelly. I have it. Okay, my Facebook group is facebook.com/groups/MIPS helmets, plural. And I promise you, if you just go to Facebook and the little search engine and put MIPS Equestrian, you'll find it faster. But yeah, I think this is a good place to call it. And we have the MIPS webinar next week. Barry, it's going to be your time of day. They're going to be up at 2 a.m. So if you want to watch, you're welcome to come join.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, I was surprised they said yes.
We've had discussions with those guys. So, and actually, they've been here. So we have a pretty good idea of how they proceed and what they do. And they do some good work, good research, but
everybody has everybody's way. And we have a lot as people to learn to figure out how to take all of the different pieces of information and find out our own personal truth and go with it.
That's correct.
And I absolutely appreciate everybody that's trying to help us be safe, because I'd like to live. So, yeah. So,
all right.
Thank you. And
right.
let
Thanks,
you get
everybody.
out of here, go home and, hear your barking dogs. Mine are still quiet.
That's
I got to make sure my husband's still alive. But
for sure.
all
right.
Everybody, thank you very much. And if you have any comments for Barry, just I will post his email on the Facebook group, and it's on the Virginia Tech website on the Helmet Lab. Yeah, there's a string of thank yous here. So thank you all, and we'll have more information about the MIPS webinar tomorrow. But yeah, it's coming next Tuesday.
All right.
Thank you very much, Barry. Have a great night.
Welcome. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.